the meeting now. And the first thing I want to do is apologize for being off schedule and having to move the webinar 1 week ahead. I was actually in Nigeria doing some work for training for Shell. I didn't make it back when I thought I was going to. And the internet is so bad in Nigeria, I didn't want to try to do the webinar from Nigeria. Half the time I couldn't even get the internet there. But welcome everybody this morning. Glad you could attend this morning. And this is webinar number 11 in our series. And it's on one of the most important things in our reliability process, and that's our people. So the title of the webinar is The Power of People. And we're going to talk about some different ways why people are key to successful maintenance reliability programs, things we can recognize in our people, things we can do to improve the skills of our people, and hopefully show you how using our people effectively can really increase our reliability program. So again, we won't spend a lot of time on this. You guys have been through my webinars. You know what kind of things we do in the company. But we're onto this proactive area, and this is a little bit, we talked about TPM last month. But it's a little bit about how are we going to use one of the most effective resources we have. Last month we talked about TPM, how Toyota does extensive training with their people, how they take responsibility for all the things that their people do, or all the mistakes they make. It's all management's fault. When a maintenance person or an operator makes a mistake or does something wrong, they blame it on themselves for not doing the proper training and not supplying their people with the tools and skills needed to perform their job. So now we're going to talk about this in more detail, the people part of it. You know, a book written by Woody Hayes back in the 70s. And the name of his book was You Win with People, and how he recognized that you don't really have to be a great coach of the game, but you have to be a great motivator of people. You have to get the most out of your people that you possibly can. And this was what this book was about. But again, when we go in to look at our facilities, we have all these different people that work there. We have different personalities. We have different skill levels. You know, we have all these other issues that come to mind. And how do we recognize what the skill levels are of each of the people in our facility? Because the skill levels are all different. The personalities are all different. You know, everything about every person that you see here and every person that you look at in your facilities, everyone's different. So how do we recognize what those skills are? How do we recognize what those personalities are? And how do we use those to our advantage in our process? Well, you know, it gets back to this thing that it's about leadership. And leadership, it's about people. So, you know, you can't be a good leader if you don't have people to lead. You can't be a good leader unless you actually can motivate these people to do things far beyond what they think they can do, or far beyond sometimes what they want to do. So a lot of times we look at ourselves as managers, but really what we have to be as leaders. And there's a difference in those two skill traits. So it says here, leadership is not about being in charge. Leadership is about taking charge of those in your charge. And so this gets into a whole different philosophy of what we're doing. You know, it's in a lot of times I remember at the company I came from, and as I promoted people up into these supervisor roles, into these crew leader roles and things like that, you know, everybody thought they were going to be in charge of something. But, you know, it's all about how you lead your people. And this is kind of some of the things we'll talk about as we go through this, it's all about leadership. But it says here, not all leaders are managers, nor are all managers leaders. It says here, managers, persons who influence on others, is limited to the appointed managerial authority of their position. That's a manager. A leader, person with managerial and personal power who can influence others to perform actions beyond those that could be dictated by those persons' form, position, or authority alone. So again, you can see the difference here. Managers manage, and managing sometimes is just looking over the process and managing the things in the process. But as leaders, we have to look beyond that. We have to look for what these skill levels are. How can we empower people and become better leaders? You know, my early career, I remember, you know, coming from a farm background where my dad was a strict disciplinarian, where, you know, mistakes were followed by pain. You know, when people go to the military, they learn one thing. You know, they learn how to do things one way and one way only. And this was kind of my philosophy when moving into running a company. You know, I remember saying this way, you know, it's my way or the highway. This was back in the late 70s, early 80s. And I used to use this comment: there's only two kinds of people at my plant, the ones that work with me and the ones that work for me. And I used to tell people, select which ones you want to be. You can work with me in the process. And I was trying to, but over time, I had to change my philosophy. As we mature in our careers, we have to change to be successful. We have to have open mind to new ideas. We have to find new ways of doing things. So it all comes down to, we have to become leaders and not just managers or bosses. And this is one of the hardest things I had, is changing my managers and my supervisors that were underneath me when I was actually running that plant. How can you become a leader? Set an example, doing good training programs, engaging your people, giving your people power and some authority to make decisions. That's what a leader does. Getting people to do things that they don't normally think they could do, or maybe they didn't have the skills to do before you started. So as we change as leaders, other things also change. The way we affect people, the way we interact with people, the way we communicate with people. We don't want to be just a manager or a boss. We have to change and do things to guide people and direct people in a different way. So as we change, and as we try to change cultures and the way we do things, we have to consider each and every person at the facility. So by this, I mean, one of the things that I did at my company, I remember, I used to coach high school football. And in high school football, one of the things we did early in the summer before we started anything, or early in the spring, is we would list everybody's name that was going to be on the football team. And we actually started breaking out that little skills thing where can this person actually play for their size and their speed and their ability? What position can they play? And you always had the parent that had the big kid that was probably the biggest kid on the team, the slowest kid on the team, but the parent sometimes thought, well, my kid should be the quarterback. Well, when you go through the skills audit and you go through and you start listing these kids out on sports, they didn't have the skills or they were the wrong size. So sometimes you put people in positions on the football team, and you have to, as a leader, you have to convince them that that's where they need to be. That's where they want to play. So we have to do the same thing when we look at our plants. What are the skills needed in each one of your jobs, and who in your plant has those skills to fulfill that job? Now it gets down to plant people. We don't have people we can just move around. So what do we have to do? We have to train on those skills and change the way people do and look at things. So you'll need to sit down as a management team and look at each person. And then as some of these people are going to have to change, how are they going to react to change? Change management is something we have to look at. Here's different things we do. So here's fixing a boo-boo as a kid. We put a Band-Aid on it. As we become adults, maybe we fix a boo-boo with a shot of whiskey. I mean, just different concepts as we change and as we mature into adulthood. But these skills audits I talk about, you may have to perform this skills audit. And I actually did this at the facility I was at. We took all the operators. Remember, we listed all the operators' names, what they were currently doing. And then we listed what skills do they really need to perform that job. And then we had to make sure they had those skills. Now, after we got done with the operators, and from that, we developed the training programs in each of those skill areas. But then I went into the maintenance group. I had a dozen maintenance people there. We listed all their names, and we started listing what skills do they have. Do they have the skills needed for what they actually do in our maintenance department? And then if they don't, what are we going to do as managers? What are we going to do as leaders to develop those skills? So again, with our operating crews, we were able to develop a 3-year plan for all the operators. With our maintenance people, we were also able to develop a 3-year plan for our maintenance people, what training they need. Now, it moved on in my company. Since I was actually the manager of that facility, I had to do the same thing with my supervisors and managers underneath me. Does my manager that manages this area have the skills required to really do that job? And a lot of times I found out through this audit it was basically, we found out sometimes we don't have the skills needed to perform the task in these areas. Now, easy option, get rid of the person and hire somebody that has the skills. That's the easy way out. The right way is we got to look at what the person needs, and we got to supply that training. We got to supply the skills needed to perform that job. They have these 2 exams that, I proctor these exams. I do some training, in areas of these exams. One of them is the CMRP exam. That's the Certified Maintenance and Reliability Professional exam. So I do a 3-day course on at companies and publicly. It's equipment reliability engineering course, a 3-day course, which covers a lot of the skills for somebody to be able to get a higher score on the CMRP exam. And then for your maintenance level people, we have something called the CMRT exam, the Certified Maintenance and Reliability Technician. This is an exam where you would give it to your maintenance people. And we do this 2 different ways. Sometimes we go into a facility, we give the CMRT exam to all the maintenance people there. When you get the report back, you get a 22 different area report from this exam that tells you where each maintenance person is at, where their weak areas are, where their strong areas are. You can develop a training course around that. Sometimes we go in and give a 3-day course or a 2-day course on all the different areas of the CMRT exam, and then we give the exam. Now, there's a pretty high pass rate there, but even with that, you still get a report back that tells you what those skill levels are. So a way to assess your maintenance people that are actually doing the work on the floor. The CMRP is to basically assess your reliability professionals and see what skills needed to improve. Now, the company I work for, they gave the CMRP exam to every, and the company I worked for was one of the largest privately owned companies in the world. So we had lots of managers, lots of reliability engineers. We gave the CMRP exam to everybody in the company. And the real reason we did that is to find out what the skill levels are. What areas does each person have to do? Now, when I took the CMRP exam the first time, I didn't pass it. I get my results back. My manager told me which books to read. I read a couple of books, went back, and I passed the exam. It was the skills I was weak in that I needed to improve. So again, that's another way to do a skills audit, was with these certifications. Here's an example of the certification you get back from the CMRT exam. You can see all these different areas that a person gets ranked at. You know, lubrication, alignment, equipment safety checks. You can see up at the top here, proper use of tools, inspection of tools, troubleshooting. You know, how do you troubleshoot? So you get some different areas of troubleshooting, and then corrective maintenance. You know, what are the tools we do to correct the problem? So that you'd get this chart back, and you would know here exactly where your maintenance person ranks by this chart, and then we can develop training programs around the weak areas. So understanding skills, every individual in your facility has different skill levels. You know, the ability of a leader to recognize these different skill levels is a talent. The ability to improve each skill level is our job. You know, but sometimes this takes research. We have to develop some training plans, and we have to have some measurements in place to see if we're actually making success in doing the training. You know, I put this slide in here. Here's the top 10 reasons for resistance to change. It says the risk of change is seen as greater than the risk of standing still. People feel connected to other people who are identified with the old way. So again, how do we change the way we do things? People have no role models for the new activities. People fear they lack the competence to change. And I ran into this at my plant. You know, people didn't think they could actually do the new things and change. And this is a common one. You know, sometimes our people are busy. People feel overloaded and overwhelmed to begin with. People have a healthy skepticism and want to be sure new ideas are sound. So how do you prove the new ways better to your people? People fear hidden agendas among would-be performers. Now, I find this a lot when I do maintenance audit at facilities around the country and around the world, that they feel companies have hidden agendas when you're doing these things and you want to actually improve their skills. You know, so, you know, at the one company, they said, yeah, they want to improve our skills, and then they want to do these jobs with less people. So the whole thing behind this is getting rid of people. So we can't let people realize or think that. People feel the proposed change threaten their notions of themselves. People anticipate a loss of status or quality of life. People generally believe that proposed change is a bad idea. So again, how do you counter all those? Well, if you look at this slide here, we have to have some kind of a relentless leader, right? You know, a lot of times it can't be, you can't just put out a memo that we're all going to do this training and it has to be done by the end of the year. That memo doesn't tell anybody anything. You know, sometimes we want to go around, why are we doing the training? Why are we improving your skills? What's really going to happen in the future? And it's going to be all about competition, right? We want to be our plant to be the best. We want to be the best in the business. So this relentless leader, it takes more than one person to change a culture. So what I mean by this, you know, a lot of times I go into plants and they're developing a reliability process. or they're developing a TPM program, and they put one person in charge of that. Well, it takes more than one person to start and develop a reliability process. I'm working with a plant right now in Canada where one guy was in charge of the reliability process, but yet he's got 10 supervisors and planners and things like that under him. You have to develop a reliability team, and each person in the team has to be in charge of different steps. And then you have to have weekly or monthly meetings so that everybody knows what the other steps are doing, so you're not overlapping in work. But a reliability, a leader is going to develop this team, and he's going to guide the team, and sometimes he's going to have very little input. He wants the team to make decisions. He wants the team to develop the process. And that's what a leader is good at. That's that relentless leader. Competency. You know, you have to understand operator and maintenance competency to plan your long-range training plan. So like I say, these skills audits, what is the competency level of my people? What is my long-range strategy or my long-term strategy to improve the competency of the people in our plant? Every plant has this issue. You know, so don't think you look out there at all these different personalities. You don't look at all the different levels of skill you have in your plant and think I'm the only plant that's like that. Every single plant has this. I had a good plant. We were the #1 plant for 10 years, and I still had skills issues, training issues, and programs I had to develop to make my plant better. Everybody has that problem. So as you look around your plant, you just have to have the ability to realize what do I need and how do I get there. Now, skills, knowledge, and attitude. Skills is the ability to perform specific tasks, gains from hands-on experience or hands-on practice and past training. So that's usually where our people are in our plant. We hire somebody, we put them out there to be trained by an operator. They have this hands-on practice, they have some past training, but that's usually where they acquire their skills. Are those skills what you want? Do we need to do more than just to develop the skills of our people? Knowledge is that body of information, facts and rules that aid or guide the performance of tasks. And this is where sometimes we don't have this available. You know, are there written policies? I wouldn't say policies. Are there written instructions? Are there guides, facts, pictures, other things that are going to help improve the knowledge of that person? And then attitudes. We're going to talk a little bit about this one in the future slides, but what are the attitudes? Attitudes of our people, it says here, the motivation to choose the correct action in performing the task. And we all have people in our plant that have different attitudes. We have managers and supervisors in our facilities. They have different attitudes. What do we do about attitudes? How do we change attitudes? How do we improve attitudes? Well, this is what a good leader does. We have to motivate or be able to motivate to change attitudes and get people doing the right things and performing the right corrective actions when they do their task. So I'm going to ask you a question here. I'll give you a couple seconds to answer. Of course, I can't hear you, but think about it as you go. Skills, knowledge, and attitude. What's the ideal employee? You know, what are the dominant employee styles you have at your plant? So if I show you this slide here, I want you to read these three things. Which person here is the ideal employee? Which one would you be looking for? So with the first one, good skills, good knowledge, and a bad attitude. What if they have some bad skills, but they have good knowledge and they have a great attitude? And what if the person has good skills, poor knowledge, and a good attitude? What is the best trait here that you're looking for at your facility, or you're looking for at your plant, or you're looking for in the people that you have to lead and manage and motivate? Well, you know, looking at these, sometimes it becomes a little bit easy because the key word we're going to key on here is that keyword of attitude. And what I tell people, if you could pick either number 2 or number 3, because with a key word in there, so if somebody has a great attitude, what should we be able to do as managers? What should we be able to do as leaders? Well, if you're a good manager and a good leader, we should be able to improve the skills, right? And the person's already got good knowledge, so it should make it easy to change the skills with good knowledge. Now, what if the person number 3 would probably be that next one? They got a good attitude, and they got some good skills, but poor knowledge. Now, shouldn't we be able to, as managers, improve knowledge with training programs? And by improving knowledge, many times we do what? We improve skills. So again, you know, these 3 traits. And of course, I don't know your facilities, I don't know your plants, but if I always ask the question every time I do this little training course or I do this webinar at a conference or I do this presentation at a conference, I always ask the question, do you have any people at your plant with bad attitudes? And everybody always raises their hand. So what do we do with bad attitudes? I go into plants all the time. They said, oh, I wouldn't go into that area. The guy doesn't want to talk to anybody. He's got a bad attitude. Or I do a training session. I had a manager come up to me and tell me it was 12 union guys at one day course I was doing. And he goes, well, I'm going to tell you right now, these guys are all union guys. They all have bad attitudes. If they don't pay attention, don't feel too bad. Well, he was trying to plant a seed with me. But when I went into it, every time I go to these meetings, I spend more time with people with what they call bad attitudes. By the end of that training session with these 12 union guys, they were all talking, they were all communicating, they were all engaged in the training. So again, we have bad attitudes, but what are we doing about it? Are we engaging those bad attitudes? Are we trying to find out why the attitude's bad? Is it a family issue? Is it a plant issue? Sometimes we have to address those issues and change that, but don't let the bad attitudes sit in the corner and never communicate with them. So it says here in this picture, it doesn't matter how many resources you have if you don't know how to use them. There will never be enough. So here we have a guy trying to get over a wall, and he's standing on a stack of ladders. He's not using the resources that are available, and sometimes at our facilities, we fall into that same trap. We don't recognize the resources we actually have. Maybe there is good knowledge. Maybe there is good skills there, but without an audit, we don't know. And how do we take advantage of those skills and knowledge and use them effectively? So if we go back to training, what kind of training does your group need? This is one thing as I go around plants, I try to help people develop this 1 to 3 year plan. And I'll give you the example. I'm going through a plant, it's probably been 5 or 6 years ago. They had taken a young supervisor that was just out of college, maybe been out of college a couple years, and they put him in charge of maintenance at this facility. Well, there's like 18 maintenance people in his department. So I'm doing a maintenance audit at the plant. We're going through, and I just asked the question as we're walking through the plant, what's the training plan for your maintenance people? And he made the comment, what do you mean? I said, what kind of training are you doing with your 18 maintenance people here? And his comment was, what would I train them on? They've all got over 20 years experience. And my comment was to that, when doing my maintenance audit, it looks like you're down about half the time. So there has to be some issues here we can train on. So one of the things that I did before I left after the maintenance audit is I developed a 3-year training program where you had a little 20-minute or 30-minute training session for each of his maintenance people every month to try to start improving those skills. So I think everybody needs to have that training plan in place. A world-class metric in training is every one of your employees should have 80 hours of training per year. Now, hardly anybody does that. I actually accomplished that with the maintenance group that I had at the company I was from. We actually had a 20-minute to 30-minute training session every Tuesday after the first break. And I wouldn't skip those training sessions unless the plant was actually down. If it was just some small thing we were working on, I always got my training meeting in. My maintenance people became very highly effective. They were figured out things on their own. We had less errors in the field. It was all around training. We became the #1 plant in the company in my business group just around training. And we started doing that with operators. So training is very important. So what are some training factors? Clearly define the context in turn to both management and employees understand the context of your training. It says focus the training on priorities that you're working on at the time. How can you demonstrate performance? We have to have a way to do this. So that's what I focused my training on in the beginning was what are the issues we're having right now? What are the problems and equipment problems and issues we're having? That was the focus of the training. We moved to other things. Involve operators and maintenance in the design and implementation of training. This is something I did in year 2 and 3. I had some of my operators dig up the information that I said, this is what we're going to train on next week. John, can you dig up some of the stuff that's happening in this area as part of the training? Try to do hands-on tasks with the training. This demonstrates understanding. A lot of times when I was doing precision alignment, you can stand in a training room and tell people how to use a precision alignment tool, but the best training is when you go out there and hook the tool up and you actually do some hands-on training with a little bench model when you're doing laser alignment. When you're using a strobe light, how to effectively use a strobe light? Well, the only way to demonstrate that is in a real-life situation. Get a motor wired up and have them demonstrate how the strobe light works. Encourage supervisors to include new skills and operator tasks, a very important aspect in training. Provide rewards and recognition of good training and skill transfer. Now, this is something that's a little hard to do, but what I did in year 4 and 5 of my training program, I was running maintenance, I started giving half year and final exams. So I told the guys, we're doing this 20, 30-minute training meeting every week. I want you to take notes because at the end of some certain date, 6 months, I'm going to give you a 20-question test. And depending on how well you pass the test, I'm going to know what you're learning. Then it switched over to, well, the company's given a 3% raise this year. And on the final exam you take, your score is going to determine what percent of that raise you get. Now, of course, we weren't a union plant, but can you do this with the union plants? We got to have a way to recognize the training. So I told them, I said, if you don't get at least an 80 on your exam, then you're only going to get 2% of the raise. If you don't get at least a 60 on your exam, you're only going to get 1% of the raise. If you get below a 60, you may not get a raise. So what it forced my guys to do in the training was they had to take notes. I bought them little folders, I bought them paper, I bought them little briefcases and file folders. They had to take notes. Now the exam was open book when they took it, but it forced them to listen, learn, take notes, and the training became much more valuable. So they got a reward for the training. You can do it not only with pay, but maybe you can do it with some other reward. Some other kind of reward, a jacket, boots, whatever it might be for scores they get on these tests. And then standardize operating and maintenance procedures. You know, how do you get buy-in? How do you get agreement when you're doing these? Well, the best thing to do is have them develop the procedures. Now, one of the things I started at the company was I went out there and I wrote the procedure. I would lay it down and say, guys, this is how we're going to do things from now on. Most of the time, they didn't do it that way. So then I started paying my maintenance people to write the procedure. So I would go at our meeting, I would say, I need a procedure written for this. If you write the procedure, I gave them an outline. If you write the procedure on paper and bring it into me, I'll give you a $25 Walmart gift card. So they'd write the procedure, I'd give them the gift card, I'd have my clerk type it up. I'd bring it back to the next meeting, get input from all the maintenance people that that's the way we should do it, let them critique it, retype it, but they develop their own procedures. Now, were they always what I exactly wanted? No, but they actually followed them because it was their procedures. So it was a way to get the procedures written and get buy-in at the same time. Now, this question here, can you train bad habits? You know, what do we do? Like I said earlier in the presentation here, a lot of times when we hire somebody new, we put them with an older employee, an older maintenance person to get trained. So we can train bad habits. And I put this slide in here. Hopefully it takes offense, but if you look at this young lad on the left-hand side, where did he learn that from? Do you think there was any motivation or any influence from the people he was around to learn to do that? If you look at the picture on the right-hand side, you know, this picture here, I showed this in New Zealand during one of these courses. And they say, well, the only thing wrong with that picture, he's on the wrong side of the truck. Well, it kind of depends on where it's actually at. It looks like they're out in the country here, so maybe not a problem. But I mean, do we want to train them to take a leak on the tire or the wheel? Probably not, right? So again, we can train bad habits where people think everything's okay. But we can also, if you look at the next slide here, we can also say that we can train anybody or anything to do anything. Well, here it says, so we have finished the training. So maybe we teach our daughter how to fill up the car for the first time when they're getting gasoline, and she gets back in the car and she's texting. Well, then she drives off and forgets to take the pump handle out of the vehicle and goes driving down the street with the gas nozzle. Did we actually finish the training? I'm not sure about that one. But can we train anything or anybody to do anything? So here this person's trained their dog to go to the bathroom on the toilet. Now, can they flush or not? I don't know. But kind of the picture emphasizes that we can train people to do whatever we want with the right training programs and the right motivation. So what are the goals of training? Now, this was a philosophy that I developed early on. Was I wanted everybody that worked underneath me to be as smart or smarter than me. The reason for this is because it made my job easier. So I did this when I was running operations. I wanted the operators to know as much as I did about the operation, lots of training. When I was running maintenance at that facility, I wanted every maintenance person to be as smart or smarter than me. So that 5-year program I did, I had maintenance people that were able to do structural strengths. I had maintenance people able to figure their own bolt strengths. You know, how much strength it would take a bolt to shear and in shear and in tension. And so, and I had people, design, when they were building stuff, how much will a weld hold and things like that. So I was making the people that worked underneath me in maintenance as smarter than me. Now, as I moved into a manager role, I wanted my supervisors underneath me to be as smarter than me. And as I did this through my career, my job became easier and easier. I had more time to improve my skills and knowledge because my people underneath me were doing what they were supposed to do. They were figuring out what they needed to do. So again, that's the goals of training. I always ask the question, everybody on here has heard the term knowledge is power. But there's only 3 things that make knowledge power. The first one is as you gain knowledge, you share it with people. So whenever I do training courses at plants, I always give people a lot of information. I give them books, I give them flash drives that has all my training materials on there. And I tell them the reason I do that is I want you to go back and teach everybody at your facility what you learned in this course. Here's the materials to do it. The other thing that makes knowledge power is if you can actually practice it. So you want to share it, and then you want to be able to use it. So if you learn something, you're able to apply it and use it. That's 2 things. The third thing that makes knowledge power is if you can sell it. And so as you go through your career, if there's any young people on here, if any people is thinking about maybe leaving their job someday and becoming a consultant, the things you learn in your career are the things you have knowledge of. And it's sometimes if you can write a book, if you can be a consultant, you're actually making money on knowledge. So those are the 3 things that make knowledge power. Now, this is information from the University of Tennessee. It says major changes in reliability and maintenance envisioned in the next 10 years. Look at the key one on there, the highest one, people and culture improvements. So improving your people and changing the culture at your facilities is going to be a major change that's going to drive your reliability process. The second one, more designed in reliability. So we're going to design things that are reliable. And then you get down to data-driven process, your CMMS tools, your predictive tools, maintenance process improvement. So you can see some of the things we look at are down here at the bottom, but where's the key thing? People and culture improvements. Here's a payback slide. It says the American Society of Training Development states that an annual investment of $625 in training per employee yields a return of $47,000 to the bottom line over that employee's career. So what it's saying here is if we spend, no matter what it is, whether you're buying them books, whether you're sending them to training courses, if you spend $625 per year per employee, that employee should be able to go out and do a better job, which should improve your quality, should improve your rate, should have less safety environmental issues, which is one of the reasons we have safety training, reduce safety incidents, because we all know that safety incidents are a major cost to the company. We can reduce quality incidents. Quality incidents is a major cost to your company. But just spend on $625 a year per employee, and over that employee's career with you, it puts $47,000 back on the bottom line. That's a lot of money over an employee's career if you do that with every employee. And it actually states here, there's studies to show that it actually works. So there's a lot of statistics that show more training we do, the less safety incidents we have. Here's a facility, one of my customers said, reported 60% less safety incidents when they started their training programs. And it wasn't just safety training, it was their overall training programs. 60% less safety incidents. That's a big number. And remember, safety incidents cost you more than other incidents. Here's another different way I want to put this information in here. You know, another way of looking at different employees, you have the shouldn't, couldn't, and wouldn't groups. So the shouldn't group is performing tasks in the process, but they lack the training or were improperly trained and shouldn't be doing some of those tasks. which means if they're doing them and they shouldn't be doing them, they could get hurt, they could cause downtime for your plant, they could cause explosions and fires. It says here, do we always know and recognize this trait? Well, without good training program, without a skills audit, you may not recognize it till it's too late. You have the couldn't group. The couldn't group's incapable of performing some task or making the right decision. This means they couldn't do what is needed to perform the task effectively. Now, why do we have the couldn't group? Well, a lot of times it goes back to our training programs. It goes back to our written procedures. It goes back to management. Why couldn't this person perform this task? Well, there's some specific reasons. And then we always have these. This gets back to attitude. We have the wouldn't group. Sometimes knows what to do, has the knowledge and skills to do the job, but due to bad attitudes, they wouldn't perform the task effectively when it comes time to do it. Again, this is back to attitude. We have to recognize these types of people too. Will they do the right thing when the time comes? Well, without good leadership, they may not. So again, another little 3 comments there on how we look at the different people in our facilities. So I always put this comment here. If an operator knows that he should keep his area clean and he decides not to, what can we do? What are the punishment systems at your plant? We just saw a lot of plants have punishment systems for attendance. We have reward systems for attendance. But what do we do with an operator? I remember back in the early days, like I talked about on the farm, if my dad left for work and he said have the shop cleaned up or have something fixed on the combine, and it wasn't done when he got back home, there was pain involved. It wasn't like sometimes when I was younger, it wasn't just yelling at you. We would yell at you too, but there was pain involved. So that was the punishment system. In the military, when you talk about military guys going in, why do they button their shirt the exact same way every time? Why do they make their bed the exact same way every time? Well, if they don't, there's punishment involved. But again, we can't do punishment at our plants anymore. We can't make people stand in the corner at the plant. We can't get out a stick and cane them if they don't clean their area. But what do we need to do? So again, we have to have some ways to make sure things get done. Is it always a reward system? We don't want to pay people extra for everything they're supposed to do, but sometimes there may need to be a reward system so they do a little bit extra. Now, this is a research study. I put this in here just to think about. It said in a research study, 2 groups of researchers were given 2 sets of rats. One set of rats was labeled smart rats, and one set of rats were labeled dumb rats. So both these groups were asked to conduct a series of tests on both sets of rats. So they were to run the rats through a complex maze, perform routines for food, and many other tests on these rats. It says after the rats were tested, the results showed that in fact the smart rats performed better on many of the tasks than the dumb rats. So this is a professor with his class, and this is the data that came back. But in actuality, after the test was done, the professor told the group the rats were all from the same genetic lines. He said there were no differences in the rats. They were selected at random out of a group of test rats in the room. So virtually he went in there and just grabbed rats out of the cages, put them in these 2 groups. But what he had done, he'd planted a seed with his students that actually carried on when the students went through and tested the rats. So again, was there any differences? And this is what I say, sometimes you go into a plant and somebody say, well, don't go into that area. That operator's hard to work at. Or you're a new supervisor at a company, say, well, you got to stay away from him. They're trying to plant a seed in your mind. They're trying to make you think. When I go into union plants, everybody always tells me, well, this is going to be a little bit harder for you. These are union guys. They don't like instruction. They don't take instruction. I always ignore that. And because if you let that seed be planted, you'll actually start trying to see what those things are, those personality traits are, and they're not really there most of the time. So it says we sometimes form opinions of people due to information, verbal communication, visual actions, personal traits. I remember going to a plant that people saying, good luck with these union guys. They won't do anything you ask. I didn't find that to be true. I gained their confidence. I got them engaged, and they performed just as well as people. So don't let the rat study influence the way you do things at your plant. Everybody's the same. So up here, an operator, doing tasks, is there to reinforcement or consequences? Well, occasional recognition and small rewards will help. This is something that and of course, until HR came into my company, I used to give my maintenance or my supervisors, they all had Walmart gift cards and it's something called a Chamber of Commerce gift cards. If they found people doing something out of the ordinary, like maybe they were supposed to clean and they actually painted a piece of machinery, or they actually took something out and scrubbed it down and made it look brand new, my supervisor would give them a gift card. So I got more people doing those kind of things. So, be a role model as a leader. Don't tell somebody that they should clean in their plan and keep their area perfectly clean and they walk into your office and it looks like a tornado went through. Be a role model. Understanding why the new way is better. This is something you have to do with your people to be a good leader. You're going to change things in your plant. You're going to go through this change process. Make them understand why the change is better. Make training interesting and rewarding. Now, what do I mean by that? I started off doing the training programs, doing the training programs myself, and I found out it's like listening to your parents sometimes. You start hearing things over and over, and you don't really hear them. So sometimes you get the maintenance people involved in some of the training. Sometimes you bring in outside people, and guide these people to make the training more interesting and make it rewarding somehow. So again, different things we can do in our training. It says here, in studies, teachers that expected high performance of their students get 30% higher performance. Coaches who expect high performance usually get it and win more games. So it's these expectations. We need to expect good performance from our people. It's part of things, but we have to do some things as leaders to get that done. What if your PM, here's an example of a PM. We talked about PMs earlier in the year. It says, what if my written PM says check the belts? What does that mean to somebody in maintenance? It might mean something to somebody that's been in maintenance for 20 years. What does it mean to a brand new maintenance person? I've seen this before. What if an operator procedure says it? And this is one I took out of an example of a plant. This was the procedure after a plant shutdown. It says after the shutdown, get the plant running ASAP. What does that mean? I mean, it may mean something to somebody that has a lot of experience or has been there 20 years, but what does it mean to somebody brand new? Get the plant running ASAP. There's no quality standard here. There's no time frame here. There's no instructions of how he's supposed to do that. How can you obtain performance if your people don't understand what performance is expected? What is precision work? And we sometimes have to define what precision work is. So precision work, I show this picture of my training. Is this precision work? And I have to say it is. This is precision work. It's precision work because he precisely went around that stick in the road when he performed this task. Now, if there's written procedures or there's instructions about that line needs to be perfectly straight no matter what, or if there's instructions say if there's something in the road, you have to get out and change it. But without written procedures and without training, I have to qualify this as precision work. But again, how do we get away from this? And the question I always ask about this is how many tasks do your maintenance people perform where they make a little judgment call like this to not do the work exactly precise, maybe tighten a bolt with the right torque, and it causes failures in your systems. So what is your definition of precision work, and how do we get precision work? Look at this slide of leadership. We have a mother duck leading her little ducklings along. Well, she leads them across this grading, and when she gets to the other side, she's only got one duck. So again, sometimes leaders, we can lead our team down the wrong path. This one here says bad parenting, but it also applies to the way we lead our people at our facilities. Good leadership, we can't just set on our employees and expect good performance, right? This is kind of the model of leadership I see at some plants where I'm the boss. We're going to do things the way I want it done. Otherwise, I'm going to, set on you till you do it right. That's not leadership. That's dictator management. Here's a good one from Alexander the Great. It says, I'm not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I'm afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion. So this is what we have to be in our plants. We can't be the sheep leading the group. We got to be the lion, and this is going to turn your facilities around. But a very good quote here from Alexander the Great. Here's a guy that wrote a book. Robert Branson wrote this book in 1981. I just took a couple things out of here, but He wrote a book called Coping with Difficult People. And again, written in 1981. You think it might be some old material, but as you read through this, you got some of these kind of people at your plant, your hostile, aggressive people. You got the people that are complainers. You got people that are silent and unresponsive. You got the ones that are super agreeable. They're always nodding their head, yes, and we're going to do that. You have some know-it-all experts in your group. You have some negative people in your group. You have some indecisive people. So these are all traits of people, and you have every one of these in some of your larger facilities. How do we handle that? So the book goes on to tell how you handle, some of these kind of people. So I just took one out of there. So if you got an aggressive type person, it says their actions and behaviors based on belief that they must demonstrate a tough personality to get things done. But listen to them. Let them vent. Control your emotions. Hold your ground. Try to find out what the key issue is and address it. Don't embarrass them in front of other people. And we're always trying to seek a win-win here. You're always not going to get them 100% on your side. But again, it's books like this and understanding like this. How do you handle these different personalities and different people at your facilities? This was me. Everything happens for a reason, but sometimes the reason is that you're just stupid and you make bad decisions. And sometimes as managers and leaders, we have to admit we do that. The way you lead people and manage people sometimes, they're just stupid. So sometimes we have to step back and look at ourselves. Why did I say that? Why did I do that? Why did I put that policy out there? And sometimes when you put things out there and you say things like that, you go back to your office sometimes and say, why did I do it that way? But again, it's sometimes because we actually do things like this. But again, engagement. Get your employees engaged. Toyota with their TPM process, great employee engagement process. They empower each employee to let the employee have ownership of the machine they're operating. And through that ownership and engagement, the employee does a better job. The employee knows that his equipment's his. And management takes 100% responsibility when there's any issues with the employee or the process. Nobody's ever to blame. So engagement. How do you get your employees engaged? Have extensive training program where the employee feels comfortable. They should listen intently to employee suggestions and concerns. Listen to your employees. Sometimes their suggestions, like I can remember one of my maintenance guys come up to me one time. He said, I've got this great idea. If you take a battery and hook it to an electric motor, then you hook an electric motor to a generator to regenerate the battery, this thing will run forever. Then you can hook something else off the motor. I listened to this, and you know that, well, through the inefficiencies of that, it never really works. But again, you try to explain that to them. It's a great idea. Keep thinking that way, but here's why it won't work. Sometimes we have to. But as we listen, employees are going to react. We're going to react positively to your thoughts. We want everybody engaged. Learning and involvement in the process breaks down barriers that create some of the attitudes. Here at TPM at Owens Corning, every operator is trained in the details of every component of the system. So this is something we did when this Owens Corning plant got their OE to 92. They wanted to go to 96. Well, now we had made the maintenance people very, very good at what they did. Now we had to make the operators. So every 3 months, we trained every operator in every detail of that operation. The operator knew the 50 failure modes of electric motors. He knew how bearings failed, how to recognize them, how to prevent them. Belts, chains, shifts in their plant. So now this plant is getting better and better all the time because the operators are well trained in equipment failures and how equipment actually operates. They're engaged. This iceberg of ignorance here, it says problems known to managers sometimes. So if you're a manager listening to this webinar, it says problems known to managers, 4%. Problems known to middle managers, 9%. Problems known to supervisors, 74%. And problems known to frontline workers, 100%. The more engagement we get, the more information we get, the more of these problems we know about, and the more of the problems we're able to solve. Key points. Assess your people, determine their skills, determine their personalities. What level of training do they need? What level of engagement do they need? And again, this last comment, be a leader, not just a manager. A final statistics says in a study, it was found that companies with good training programs had 31% fewer injuries. Again, I'm relating this back to safety, but it's about everything that goes on the company. It's not just safety. We become more and more effective as we do more and more training. So leadership, it's about the people. It's not about the plant and your programs and processes. It's about the people. All these personalities in this picture right here. How do we lead all these personalities? It's leadership. So again, I put this slide here again. Leadership is not about being in charge. Leadership is about taking care of those in your charge. We have to take care of our people, take responsibility for the things they do, and make sure they get the training and the skills that they need to require. And it says here, this no man should be in a management, it should say no person, sorry, an old quote, but no person should be in a management position that does not have the guts to defend his people. So what this means, if you're leading and you've actually done the training, defend your people. Take responsibility for what they do. I remember supervisors used to come in my office and they'd have a major issue in your plant. We'd talk about it. And I always said to every one of my supervisors, that issue that happened in your area is 80% your fault. It's only 20% the operator's fault. So take responsibility, fix the problem, make sure it doesn't happen again. Toad just looks at it a different way. It's 100% their fault. So it says here, your company will not be successful unless you fully use the power of your people. So again, that's the title of our webinar today and the title of what we want to do, or the things we want to do with our people. So again, thanks for attending the webinar this month. We'll do our final webinar for the year next month, and we're just going to recap the whole year. And then me and Justin will have the new webinars for next year. We've got a whole series of new webinars for next year. So look those over, see if you're interested in joining the webinar series again next year. And again, the key thing to this is get your maintenance people in front of some of these ones, because next year we're going to talk about some failure modes of specific components like motors. We're going to talk about failure modes of V-belts. And again, as you look at the training webinar thing, if you want other webinars, if you want other things that's just done privately for your company, let us know. We can put those on for you. It's really cheap to put 6 or 8 or 10 people or 50 people in front of a screen and do one of these webinars on something that's really a problem in your company. So thanks for again attending this month. We'll see you next month. Justin will have the PDF presentation of this webinar available here in the next couple hours. Again, we got the recorded version. If anybody in your company missed this and you need to play it again, you have that. So again, thanks for attending, and we'll see you the second Tuesday of next month.